Yeah. Hello everyone and thank you very much for watching these videos. Let us start. Okay, in the last video we have covered how to set up the food product and the relationship between owner and the food product. Now our next task is to set up the relationship between the owner and the worker. Okay. So we have to create one worker entity first, as usual, like we have done previously when we are doing Hibernate relationships. So you can copy from that project also. So I'll be creating one DTO class, entity class we are creating, that is worker. So you can copy all the constraints from the previous project that you have done for practice purpose. We use @entity to generate table for this entity class inside the database. Remaining all things we already know about those constraints and methods. So just copy all these things except food order. We have to copy this thing up to owner. Right. First we have to do this import. Now as usual we have to generate getters and setters. Alt S. Right. Now you can see here clearly uh, what we have done. In the owner, what we have to do, we have to set up the relationship between the owner as well as worker. So if you look at over this picture, so owner is having many workers, so we have to represent inside the owner entity as one to many with worker. Inside the owner class, so we'll be writing @one to many annotation, one to many. We have to import it. Here we have to use worker entity. Right. And inside the owner table, no primary keys are allowed of the workers. So we use mapped by. As usual, owner. So this is the constraint name, means the variable name which is present inside the worker entity. So we have to mention inside the worker entity as well as many to one with owner. Already we have represented here. So that inside the worker table, owner column will be created and owner primary keys will be represented inside the worker table. So I will show you one picture like so that you can understand clearly. This is an example. Okay, so here you can see this is the worker table, and here you can see the owner IDs inside the worker table. So we had set up the relationship between the worker and the owner entity. So you can just copy paste from the previous project that you have done to understand the relationships between entities. So just copy it from there. And our next task is to set up the DAO layer for this worker entity class. Let us create a DAO IMPL class, worker DAO IMPL. And to represent this as a DAO layer, repository entity is mandatory. And we require entity manager, factory entity manager, all these things. You can copy this one. I'm copying all these things. Okay, we have pasted these methods inside the worker DOI MPL. Just we have to edit them properly. So here instead of save owner, we have to write save worker. We are following convention. Worker. So here also as worker. So we have completed these methods. One method is to save the data, one method is to retrieve the data. We have to remove unused imports. Our next task is to set up the controller layer for the worker. Worker controller. So to represent this as a controller layer, what is actually controller layer? It's a layer which handles all the user requests, is considered as controller layer. To represent this as a controller, we have to use controller annotation. And we have to save the data of the worker. So we use auto void to get the object of DAO class. Worker DAO MPL worker DAO. So we can copy from the previous controllers. So create and save. I'm copying this. Paste it. So instead of create, we have to use worker. Same thing, you can copy paste for the method name. And then here we have to commit as worker model. Here create worker. Lowercase letters, no convention for these P files. Have to use worker object. Import. And here save worker. Copy this. Paste here. Here worker. Now we are using worker DAO. Say worker, and we are passing the worker object. Yes, and everything is as it is. Limits. And we are keeping here owner message because owner is the person who creates the worker object. We are using owner message only to get the result whether the entity is saved or not. Check yourself whether you have changed everything, method names, attributes, file names, everything. Okay. First check in the create worker, is there any where we need to change anything, and then check yourself whether is there anything in save also. So now we'll work according to this. Now we require a JSP file, that is create worker. So let us create worker JSP file. Create worker. So we require that MVC form. We'll copy from the previous one. This tag library. So we are importing this within this create worker JSP file. And you already know about this form. You can copy from the same page, previous one. Let us not copy so that you might get confused. We'll type form. Now a object should be added. Like I will show you the pictures. Right. So here you have to understand one thing. So the user interface will look as this: create worker, create product, view products. So whenever the owner clicks on create worker, behind the scene, create worker URL is provided here. This create worker URL is provided for this method create worker inside the controller of worker. So here what is happening, a object, worker object is connected to this JSP file with the help of this attribute value, worker model. So you can see here worker model attribute value is provided for this attribute, so that this worker object will be connected to this JSP file. Okay. So as usual, we all know this. We are representing the ID of the owner inside the worker uh, form. So our task is very simple, just to represent all worker entity variables in this MVC form. Worker name, email, password, and this. So already you know, like inside the session there is the owner ID that we have stored previously while the login of the owner. So when owner will be logged in from his account, so immediately inside the session the ID of the owner is stored inside the session object. The session object is available for every file in the entire application. And whenever the user will enters the details, okay, so it will be collected from this MVC form in the form of object. Okay, here you can see the owner ID is reflected in the save form page of worker. So whenever user clicks on submit button, so internally the submit button will invoke the URL of save worker. This save worker is the URL. Okay, for this save worker URL, the functionality is given in this way. So here what is happening, one more thing you have to observe. The worker ID is stored inside the session object. Okay, asterisk which is followed by the worker, same as the owner, and everything asterisk, nothing else is there. And here you can see the small change. So already like while forming the relationships, I told you like owner is having relationship with worker. So here what we are doing, we are retrieving the owner, okay, whose owner ID is present inside the session object. We are retrieving the ID and we are retrieving the owner object, and we are setting the owner object to that worker, and then we are saving the worker object. Right. So our task is to complete this MVC form inside the create worker. So first we have to connect the worker object using model attribute. So here we have to connect the worker object. In the worker controller, this value you have to copy, worker model, copy this and paste here. And here name, form input, path, worker name. So we have given this. So what is this worker name? This is actually the variable name is present inside the worker entity. Here you can see worker name is a variable name inside the worker entity, email and password. Now here we copy and paste it for 3 times. And here email. Password, password. The next one is we have to represent the owner ID. Owner ID. We are using normal input tag of HTML. Type equals to number, value. Here I will use expression tag. Read only means we cannot edit. And I will use input tag for submit button. Yeah. Now we are getting the owner ID value. So during the login of the owner, what is happened, like I'll show you on page so that you will get some idea. Right here you can see while the login of the owner object, okay, inside the session owner ID is stored inside the session object. Okay, now we are going to retrieve the owner ID. So let us see like how it is named inside the session. All right, here you can see inside the session it is named as owner ID. This is inside the owner controller class. Just I am checking with what name owner ID is stored inside the session object. This session object is available for the for every page, each and every page, even the MVC form also. So here we are going to retrieve using scriptlet tag. Here I will be using object object O equals to session dot get attribute. The value name is owner ID, and here I will be using that O. I will name it as obj, that it will be good, and I will be saving this. So now we have successfully created the MVC form for the worker, and our next task. So our task what is here, we connected the worker object using this value. So now whenever user clicks on submit, okay, whenever user clicks on submit, what is happening we'll see now. So here, look at here, whenever owner is filling the details of the worker, he will be clicking on submit. This submit will invoke the URL that is save worker. For that save worker, we have to provide the functionality. So here you have to provide the connection between submit and the destination. So inside the MVC form of the worker, we have to use action attribute. Action save worker will be follow convention. Save this. So now we have to provide functionality for save worker URL. So we already provided that functionality, but some more changes we have to modify. So inside the MVC form, you can see here all the data which is collected through the MVC form, it is collected in the form of object with the help of this value. So now when it is invoking save worker URL, all the data is collected with the help of this model attribute inside this variable. Okay. So now while saving the worker object, worker object requires the owner object. It requires the owner object. So why owner object is required for the worker entity? Let us see in the worker. So here worker is having relationship as many to one with the owner. So worker object requires owner object. So now what we are doing, like we will be retrieving from the session. So I am using HTTP servlet request. HTTP session request dot get session. Int id equals integer. Now we have to parse int. Now here will be referring session right session dot get attribute. So the name is owner ID. I will be downcasting to int. After that, we have to retrieve the owner object. To retrieve the owner object, we require owner DAY object. We'll be having auto void owner DAY owner DAO. Owner DAO dot get owner. Now we are setting the owner object to the worker. Worker dot set owner. and this worker object is collecting the owner object, and that worker object is saved inside the database, which returns the message. This message will be reflected inside this JSP file. Now let us see how it will be working. So first, we cannot run the create worker directly. We have to log in from the owner portal. Now we'll be providing the details of the owner. Kumar3@gmail.com. Pankaj33. Okay. Now owner will be creating worker. So we provided the functionality for this create worker URL. Let us check once again. Inside the page. No, we did not provide the functionality for this create worker. So here we have to provide create worker. We'll be saving. Everything is loaded successfully. I will be clicking on the create worker. So whenever I click on the create worker, it is running and it is not updated. You can see the hash symbol on the top of the address bar of this web page. Once you can reload, I will be clicking on the create worker. Now we got all these things and the owner ID is reflected. I cannot edit this. So, worker. Kiran 6@gmail.com. Password Kiran 46 at the rate. Submit. So the details of the Kiran is saved successfully and I will click on back. We can create one more worker like that. Finish. Gmail.com. Ganesh Apple name. Click on submit. So this is the way we will be creating this create worker. So we have saved the worker details. Now our next task is to set up the login validation for the worker, because here in this entire application the worker is the person who works more, right? So worker has to create the food orders given by the customers, so we have to provide the login functionality for the worker. So our first task is to create the worker login. We'll be creating worker login file. Worker login. The worker login is created and we'll be using normal HTML form worker login, and for login validation purpose we use method type of post is secure. Email email, name, email, password, good. Type equals to password, name equals to password. Submit. Value equals login. Will be naming at the center tag paste and save the. Now our task is to provide functionality for this URL. To provide the functionality for that URL, go to the controller class where all requests will be handled. I'll just copy paste this. Copy. Worker login. So we will follow convention. Worker login. We'll be having HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response. Email request dot get parameter this email string password request dot get parameter password. Now after retrieving the email and password, we have to validate them with the details which are present inside the database. So we'll use return type as void. So we have to validate with the details which are present inside the database. So now we have to validate using one method which is present inside the DAO layer. Like this we have to do right here. Here you can see inside the worker login method we are validating the email and password provided by the user using find by email and password method. This find by email and password method is present inside the DAO class that we have to set up now, which provides the data for us if details are present with the given email and password. Otherwise it will take to the login page once again. Now our task is to provide a method inside the worker DAO IMPL class. Move to the worker DAO IMPL class. Public worker login and email comma string password. So we'll be using query which is from persistence package. Query Java it's a dot persist. Query entity manager dot create query. So we have to use JPQL command, that is Java persistence query language. Select aliasing is must and should in this. Select W from worker W where email equals to question mark 1 and password equals to question mark 2, and we have to set the parameters. Query dot set parameter 1 comma email query dot set parameter 2 comma password. And we are using a try and catch block. I told you in the previous video where we get a no result exception when we provide invalid details which are not in the database. So we are using try and catch block, right? Object obj. Okay, now we are retrieving the object. Query dot get single result will be returning obj. Sorry, I'll cast a to worker. And here inside the catch block, have to no result exception. Return null. Successfully we have done this. So if you see the previous video, you will get to know. Once again, it will be as a practice for you. So after setting this worker login method inside the DAO IMPL class, our next task is to use this validation inside the controller class. Worker equals worker DAO dot worker login. We are sending the email and password, and here we have to validate worker not equals to null. If it gives worker object, so we have to take it to the home page, else we have to take it to login page again. So now here before that we have to use in the login page to represent invalid credentials. Those kind of things are required. So for that I'm trying to get the print writer object. Print writer out equals to response dot get writer, and a response is displaying all these things, right? So will be response of page will be set content type HTML text slash HTML, and here we are using requested dispatcher dispatcher equals to request dot get requested dispatcher. Here will be opening worker home. We use only lowercase letters for the JSP files or any HTML files. Dispatcher dot forward. It is carrying an exception, that is servlet. And here we are using message out dot print ln. Use center tag, and I will use h1 tag. Here I will provide invalid credentials. And then we'll use requested dispatcher to just copy this and paste it. Here we have to provide login, worker login, and instead of forward we use include. Make sure you are using include here. So no, just we have to check with that. Before checking with this, now we have to use worker home, means we have to create one worker home page, that is JSP file. Create your worker JSP file. Worker home JSP. In the worker home JSP, what we have to do, we have to allow the worker to create the orders. We can copy from the owner home page. Copy this, paste it. Instead of create food product, here we'll say create order. Now no URLs, only hash. View orders. This is the home page of the worker which will be displayed. The worker homepage is ready. Now we have to log in. So already the page is running. So we can copy this. I'm running the worker login. Worker login .jsp. The worker login JSP file. Here, what is the worker? We have to see now. So here, this is a worker table. There is Kiran as well as Ganesh. So we'll go with the Kiran. Kiran6@gmail.com. Kiran46. And while doing login perform of the worker, I have to think about the relationships, right? So worker is the person who creates the food order, and so there will be relationship between worker and the food order, right? So worker details are required by the food order. So while performing login operation, we have to make connection between session and this worker object. So once again, here we are requesting for session. HTTP session request dot get session. Now inside the session we'll send the worker object session dot set attribute. We'll name it as worker. We'll set up the entire worker object. We'll save. So inside the session, worker object will be stored whenever worker will log in with his credentials. And I want to inform to the users whether it is owner login or worker login. Right. So here we're going with Kiran. Kiran6 at the rate gmail.com. Password is, what is the password of the Kiran? Kiran46 at the rate. Kiran46 at the rate. I'll click on login. So we are successful in getting the home page of the worker. So we'll see the next thing, how to make the relationship between the food order and as well as the workers. And thank you very much for watching this video.